Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by Terence Corrigan. Terence, how are you doing, sir?
Hi, Nick. Well, yourself?
Hot. And also Dr. John Endres. John, how are you?
Hot and sweltering, Nicholas, but otherwise very well, thank you.
Excellent. I don't know why I made myself tea, but that's my problem. All right. So first, a word from our sponsor, and we are sponsored again today by Bitvice. So Bitvice says, we all know that Bitcoin is the best performing asset of the past decade, and many people are accumulating Bitcoin as a strategy to hedge themselves against fiat currency debasement and government overreach. The guys at Bitvice have developed their latest product, StatStacker, to help you accumulate Bitcoin over the long term. StatStacker allows you to set up recurring purchase orders directly from your bank account, then accumulates Bitcoin for you at the frequency and amount that you choose, depositing that Bitcoin directly into your own self-custody wallet. There are many use cases for StatStacker, for simply automating a weekly purchase of some Bitcoin for your own personal stack, to setting up a long-term investment fund for your kids. Accumulating Bitcoin in automated regular amounts has never been simpler, safer, more convenient. Try out StatStacker today. There'll be a link in the description below, which you guys can follow if you're interested in this, and also visit bitvice.io. And we thank them very much for sponsoring us once again on the Daily Friend Show. Now, let us get into the news of today. And the first piece of news that we should probably discuss is one of those, I think, famous or infamous political characters on our scene, depending on your point of view. Panyaza Lesufi looks like he is headed for great things, or at least greater things than currently. So he has made a name for himself, being the Gauteng MEC for education for some time now. And there was murmurings, which we did actually cover on the show a few months ago, that he was soon going to be seeing promotions within the ANC. Well, it looks like that time has come. The Gauteng ANC has accepted David Makura's resignation as Gauteng Premier. The provincial spokesperson says that Panyaza Lesufi is expected to replace him as Premier very soon. The party was very complimentary of Makura, saying that they hailed him as an exemplary leader and that they were a bit sad to see him go, but they were very excited to see Panyaza Lesufi coming in. Well, on Thursday, there will be election of a new premier, so all MPLs will come to the legislature to elect a new premier. The African National Congress has expressed itself on its chairperson, that the chairperson will then take over the baton in what has been a very seamless and smooth transition. And this is apparently after in June, Makura was asked to vacate the office by the Gauteng ANC. He has also said that he's not going to be standing for any more leadership positions in Gauteng. So Makura has been in charge of the ANC in Gauteng since 2014, and he very narrowly scraped in 2019 when the ANC only just managed to get a majority in Gauteng. I think it was by about one seat. But I guess now the question is, what does the Panyaza Lesufi's tenure as Gauteng Premier hold? John, I'd like to start off with you. What are your thoughts? What can we expect from Panyaza Lesufi, head of Gauteng?
I think, Nicholas, before we start, what I find very interesting about this process is how disconnected it feels for me as a Gauteng resident. You have one premier, and now you're getting a new premier, and you don't really get much say in that decision. So you had Makura resigns, you get a smooth, seamless transition, all negotiated within the ANC, and you get a new one, which would be Panyaza Lesufi. And that is maybe a little bit of a democratic deficit that we have there, that these kinds of positions sort of switch quite seamlessly without much involvement from the public, or indeed from voters in the province. That having been said, I think that Panyaza Lesufi is probably going to be a bit of a breath of fresh air within the Gauteng ANC, and I would also not be surprised if he had designs on national politics, because you do get the sense that much of the ANC has become very staid, very stale, doesn't really come up with new ideas or interesting concepts. And Lesufi, as much as we might disagree with his approach and his statements, I think does bring some energy into the role. And I think it is going to be quite interesting to see what sort of policy steps he brings into the premier role. We know that he is not shy of controversy. He's, as MEC for Education, was always very ready to go to any school where there was the faintest whiff or allegation of any racist incident, and he would be there with the media, the cameras, the blue light brigades, etc., making sure that he was at the center of attention and able to position himself as somebody who fearlessly defends whatever values he might hold. And I think we're probably going to see a similar kind of role for him as a premier, with himself as the personality very much at the center of his role and his position. And I think it is going to be quite confrontational because he seems to thrive on that. And for the ANC, that's probably not a bad thing, because at the moment, I think they're becoming just a little bit feeble and being seen as being too meek. And if I was the ANC, I'd be quite happy to have somebody like Panyaza Lesufi rising to higher ranks, even though I don't endorse many of his positions. Nick.
Terence, your thoughts on Panyaza Lesufi, but also one wonders whether he can actually reverse some of what polling suggests is a massive ANC decline in Gauteng. It looks like the ANC is headed for loss of the province, and a loss that the EFF may not even be able to bail them out of in Gauteng. Who knows what I mean, I've seen figures of them polling sort of in the 30s in Gauteng, which would be a devastating drop for them. So one wonders whether Panyaza Lesufi will be able to turn it around, or whether he's only going to be in the job for about 2 years or so. What do you make of all this, Terence?
Well, I think that the interesting thing about him is that he's probably one of the very few politicians, let's say, next generation that people could put a name to. I think I like to use this phrase, I'm old enough to remember, but the end of Mandela's cabinet, you kind of knew the incoming people because they had established profiles. The same thing to a large extent when Zuma came in. It just seems that we have minnows and time servers now. Very few people, I think, in certainly at that sort of provincial level, strike much of a chord, and he's an exception there. He's given, I think, every impression of being a race nationalist and a race baiter, and I think that's falling back into the sort of one area where the ANC has some sort of competitive advantage. But I think that the ANC's decline has less, isn't because it lacks visionary leaders. I think its stewardship of the nuts and bolts of the country has just become disastrous. It was a sort of dark chuckle this morning where I saw on News 24 that Johannesburg is facing water. Well, I live in Joburg, so it's a sort of rather foolish, self-effacing chuckle. Load shedding, water shedding, and no hand on the tiller. The incoming ANC administration certainly didn't pick the most opportune time to do it.
And of course, there's a court challenge against the new mayor's election, so who knows whether he'll even be the mayor for that.
Maybe if I was the DA, I'd be saying, no, just keep it for a while. let's try and spin this one out so you guys get stuck with all the problems. I think also it's a generational thing, as much as the ANC under Mandela's Mbeki and Zuma had their problems and had their weaknesses and their scandals, one got the impression that there were enough people of consequence to give the organization a certain gravitas. When Panyaza Lesufi is sort of it's not very much.
Right. No, I agree that he is, when you talk about kind of newer faces in the ANC, he is one of the few who's actually kind of managed to sort of be anywhere. I mean, when you kind of list people in the ANC, you go, well, Panyaza Lesufi, Ronald Lamola, I don't know. Yeah, so they really have a short bench. But I just don't see him arresting the ANC's decline in Gauteng. If anything, he might even make it worse, because there's one thing Panyaza Lesufi can do. It's people who don't like him, he can really supercharge them. And I'm sure a lot of them are going to come out and vote against him. John, any final thoughts on this before we move on?
I think you hit the nail on the head, as did Terence. So yeah, I think he probably is the best thing the ANC has got going for it at the moment, pretty much. If it's looking to its future, and it isn't that much. Nick,
indeed. All right, let's move on to our next story, and this is, we're going to combine a whole bunch of different things that are going on into kind of one general point here. So, gentlemen, feel free to talk about whichever of these stories you're interested in. The first is that there was this week there was an awful murder of a German tourist. Apparently, he was in Mpumalanga, and apparently him and the car he was driving in was attacked by a number of men who told him to get out of the car and hand over valuables. He rolled up the windows and reversed and was shot while doing so, and unfortunately he died. And the car then crashed into a wall. The robbers fled, taking nothing. So completely senseless madness. At the same time, the Hawks have finally done a big operation to capture a whole bunch of what they say are zama-zamas. They captured a number of them who they say are kingpins in illegal gold mining operations or illegal mining operations. Suspects aged between 35 and 60. They also claim to have impounded 13 high-performance vehicles and a truck during the raids, which they say were all purchased with the proceeds of crime. And lastly, in this story, was just one of the kind of wild west stories. There was a police station in Ekurhuleni, Devon police station, where apparently a number of men came in to report a hijacking. However, it soon became apparent that they weren't there to report a hijacking. They were there to rob the police station of its firearms, and they have managed to get away with 3 police rifles and 7 pistols. That's when the police station is getting robbed, the situation is, shall we say, not good. Terence, you had some thoughts particularly on the tourism aspect, but it really seems like the sort of lawlessness in the country that we've dealt with for decades now, but it really does seem to be reaching a bit of a crescendo now. What do you make of this?
Well, once again, let me play the age card. I remember in the 1990s that speaking about crime was like completely politically incorrect, and you were a complete Afro-pessimist and racist and whatever. Sorry, there was a problem there, and there's a problem now. And I maintain that many of our problems across the board come from one source. It's the failure to build an effective public service, of which the police is a critical element. Now, I think some of the initiatives undertaken in the 1990s were, in principle, good. They did things like, wanting to make police charge officers more welcoming places, community servicing, but they never really got off the ground. So you had this bizarre push and pull. There were new regulations about how police officers could use their firearms, and then which severely restricted that, taking away. I'm not sure if they received them back, their assault rifles, and then you would have the Minister of Police saying, "Shoot the bastards, no warning shots." Warning shots, by the way, guys, top tip, bad idea. You do not do warning shots. If you're going to discharge a firearm, make sure you're doing it within full knowledge of the law and doing it properly.
Warning shots are for TV.
Warning shots are for TV, but the bullet has to go somewhere. Okay, so just that's a public service announcement from your friendly IRR analyst. So we have this sort of perfect storm, where people don't take the police particularly seriously. Don't take the law particularly seriously. You can pretty much get away with it, and that goes from the top to the bottom. We have a society that is extraordinarily violent, and this is interesting. Interesting thing. Speak to people from elsewhere in Africa, even those who come from conflict societies. I remember speaking to an Egyptian guy who was working as a delivery man, and he said, and I asked him, what's Egypt like? And he was a Coptic Christian. He said, oh, you got massive communal tensions and whatever, and he's afraid of that. But he's not afraid of someone just pulling him on the side of the road and shooting him for the keys to his truck. He says that doesn't happen in Cairo. It happens here. And as far as the tourism goes, that's something that happens every so often. There's a story I remember in the 1990s, a big story about a Polish woman. There's been a British couple that disappeared. I think it was about 2017, 2018. And I think that the frustrating thing there is that tourism is low-hanging fruit. It's something we should be capitalizing on, and I think it's important to see this in perspective. Most visits to South Africa are trouble-free. Most tourists come, have a good time, and leave. They're probably more likely to be offended by locals trying to rip them off. When they discover that you have an American or a German accent, all of a sudden, oh, no, that's the old prices. Let me give you the new one. I know that for a fact. Or, you try and change money. But it just takes sort of one or two of these, I think, probably to chase away 10,000 people, or, a travel agency somewhere in Mannheim that would otherwise, be recommending, your South African safari. I know from having lived in Taiwan, Asian tourists from those Asian countries, they like open spaces, they like golf courses, they like wildlife. And you can go to Africa to do it, or you can go to Australia for very much the same experience. And the reason a lot of people would rather go to Australia is it's developed, and there's a sense that your security is not going to be an issue. As I say, it's Taiwan, Japan, China, all of those fast-growing, rapidly, densely populated societies. And I think that's it's an opportunity that we're not capitalizing because of stuff like this.
John, you also wanted to make a point about just kind of the sort of madness that is going on. I mean, when the police station is being robbed, the situation has not gone well. What do you have to add?
Where to start, Nick? Where to start? And I think, Terence, you really drew out the economic implications of the lawlessness very well. And it's also something that's been covered on this show many times before, as how it ranges across the entire economy. It's not just tourism, it's also transport, infrastructure, logistics, it's the mining sector, et cetera, et cetera. And all of this is a huge drag on the economy. And if there's to be any progress in terms of South Africans' prospects and increasing their wealth, this problem needs to be solved, because you can't get proper growth as long as you've got incidents like this occurring. And the reason these stories are linked is because, of course, when the law enforcement authorities themselves are unable to protect themselves from being robbed, they're unable to maintain law and order in respect of their own possessions. It is an illustration of how far gone already the country and the society is on the road to lawlessness and anarchy. And that is what's so worrying. I think we, as South Africans, we've become inured to the terribly high murder rates. And so somebody might rightly point a finger at us and say, why do you care about this German tourist? It's just one murder out of the 50 per day that we see in South Africa, or 60. But the point is exactly that the Germans are not inured to high murder rates, and they're not expecting to be killed on holiday. That's what makes the stories.
There's some evidence of the incredible devastation that this kind of thing can have to a tourism industry. Thailand is a massive tourist industry. There was a murder of a British tourist there a while ago, and it for at least a year it caused serious problems with bookings and big reduction in their tourist income.
Exactly. And this is, one area, well, it's actually one of many areas where South Africa does have a competitive advantage, but your competitive advantage is worth nothing if you cannot exploit it, make use of it. And so tourism, we've got the charismatic megafauna, we've got the open landscapes, we've got the beaches, we've got the mountains, we've got the parks, the golf courses, everything is there, everything is there to be used and utilized. and generate revenue for the country, boost the economy, create employment at a significant scale. But if we don't create the conditions, then all of that potential goes to waste. And that is a very, very sad thing to see happening. I'll leave it at that, Nick.
Look, if I can just add something there, it was about 2007. The renowned tour guide / popular historian David Rattray was murdered in KZN.
That was a great loss for the country as a big fan of South African history.
Now, I belong to several history groups. You don't really have these anymore, but Yahoo used to host them. And these are mostly kind of middle-aged British or Australian men, who spend a lot of time reading books and playing with toy soldiers and things like that. But also they tend to be educated and to have money. And it's the kind of ideal tourist to come to South Africa because they're interested in often out of the way places. And it's just good Lord, everyone kind of knew David Rattray and what's going on there. And there were a couple of people saying, "Oh, I was planning on taking the family to see, to see a St. Luana and Ungela and various other battle sites that I think many South Africans wouldn't be familiar with. But you'd rather go and see, the site of the Vinegar Hill uprising in New South Wales. At least that the worst you're going to get there is ripped off by a cool drink salesman."
Yeah, no, exactly. All right, let's move on to our next story. And this is some interesting stuff coming out of COSATU. So there's been lots of negotiations now over whether the public sector is going to accept government's wage offers. The two parties started quite far apart from each other. The unions went into this demanding a 10% wage increase when negotiations began in May. Despite what's the inflation rate now? 6.5, 6.8? 8, I can't remember. Over 7. So still, nice above inflation increase. Must be nice to be in the public sector if that's where you set your expectations. However, government has, I think a little bit to my surprise, actually taken a slightly less indulgent approach and started off by offering 1.5%. So as you can see, there's still a fair amount of distance between the two negotiating sides there. Anyway, government has now up this to a 3% offer, and one of COSATU's unions, SADTU, the South African Democratic Teachers Union, has decided that it thinks that COSATU should accept this wage offer, which is unusual for South Africa's big unions in COSATU, which tend to stick together and constantly demand more. In fact, SADTU said that it would be that 7 out of their 9 provinces voted in favor of taking this wage offer. And that would be very sad if COSATU did not accept it, because government might withdraw it and we won't get such a good deal in the future. Also, at COSATU's recent Congress to debate some of these issues, 2 of their biggest unions, Pop Crew, which is the police union, and NAHAWU, which is the nursing and healthcare workers union, took a very hard line saying, no, we must keep pushing for a higher wage increase. But also beyond that, they suggested that COSATU should stop backing the ANC and instead throw their support behind the South African Communist Party. The SACP has been threatening to do this every single election, I think pretty much since 94, and has never had the guts to do it. But with growing ANC weakness, maybe if they had COSATU support, they might actually dip their toe in the electoral waters. Interesting stuff. John, what do you make of this story? What does it say, do you think, about the political landscape and the union landscape in the country?
Well, I think historically, the tripartite alliance has had a certain division of labor, where COSATU contributed the ability to mobilize millions of people in support of the ANC and voting for the ANC, whereas the SACP tended to be the intellectual engine room of the alliance, contributing many of the fantastic ideas, the consequences of which we are so fortunate to suffer daily. Now, it's interesting to see that these partners appear to be drifting apart. So we saw, for example, first Cyril Ramaphosa and later, I think it was Gwede Mantashe, being booed off the stage at COSATU rallies. So you can see that the reception was quite frosty to the ANC. The COSATU is not happy with the way the ANC is running the country. They think that workers, should get more benefits, etc., etc. And we also saw the SACP sort of once again, as it has done so many times in the past, flirting with the idea of actually participating in an election rather than riding on the coattails of the ANC into public office. I'm not sure if much will come of this, so I'm not expecting to see the SACP on the ballot paper in 2024. Would be quite surprised if that happened. But nonetheless, I think the fact that these three partners are now at loggerheads is an important development, because if they're not pulling in the same direction, it will weaken the ability of the ANC to attract votes in 2024. And that, of course, creates more scope and more space for the coalition partners to have an opportunity of taking votes away from the ANC and making a good showing in 2024. Nick?
Right, the tripartite alliance is a little bit like a road trip that's gone awry. When things were going great, everyone was having a good time. All three people in the car were enjoying each other's company. And now that they're lost and the petrol's a bit low and they're not so, and someone's lost their wallet and it's just not so great, everyone's starting to bicker and turn on each other and blame everyone else for everything that's gone wrong, despite the fact that they're all, I think, equally to blame. Terence, what do you make of this? Should we draw any big conclusions about the way that the tripartite alliance is going?
Let me just say, as an opening shot, I'm very much in favor of above inflation increases for myself. Just keep that in mind. I think that COSATU maybe has a certain latitude here in terms of teachers, white collar jobs for generations. That's been one of the key mobility ladders for African people. I remember actually someone saying to me that if you were raised in a township under apartheid and you wanted something more than being a laborer, it was teaching or nursing. Those were your options. It's a secure career, and I think that many of these people are supporting extended families, and they see that lots of people have lost work, and maybe you don't want to rock the boat too much. Your situation is not desperate. And I think it's important to understand here that for all the talk about that comes out of the political left about opposing the system, you are the system if you are in that position. So that doesn't surprise me. As far as moving away or going it alone, we've heard this since Mandela's time. Once again, I remember the endless discussions about Mbeki will break the alliance and whatever. No, I think that the ANC has sort of been the big dog, and the SACP I just don't think would have the brand name recognition to do very much. It would have to be attached to some sort of workers' party. But we've seen with SAFTU and the Revolutionary Workers' Party or whatever it is they call themselves. I mean, they had organization, they had NUMSA behind them, they had charismatic people, Nzima Vavi, whatever you think about him or his politics or his office picadillos. He had a big brand recognition. And did they even get into parliament? I don't think that there is a huge appetite for that. I think also something else with the SACP. I think that they do serve as what's left of the Brains Trust. I don't think there's much intellectual firepower left in the ANC. And for Ramaphosa, it's probably the most coherent voice that's left. And they took up they nailed their mask to opposing state capture. I think it's very opportunistic, since they like their own form of state capture. But there it is, and I think that's kind of where that's the hill that they're pretty much going to die on. So
Yeah, I just
loggerheads, but I think it's the general incoherence that's coming out of a party that's running out of patronage. Really.
Yeah, I don't think that voters, if you really want to vote for a left-wing party, I think you're particularly spoiled. I think you're quite spoiled for choice in South Africa. Everything from the sort of I don't know, UDMs to EFFs to ANC to 1,000 other parties. You can even go radical with your Socialist Workers' Party or whatever. So I really don't see how the SACP is really going to distinguish themselves, for example, from the ANC, except to kind of claim, as so many parties have before, that no, we're like them but good. Never really been that effective an electoral strategy. Anyway, John, any final thoughts in 30 seconds before we close up?
Yes, very briefly. Just a shout out to the finance minister for trying to rein in spending, as hard as that is. We don't often have good things to say about politicians, but I think that is quite good what he's doing there. Yes. The same as the Reserve Bank governor. And I think both of those, are holding the line. I think if they weren't in place, our spending would explode, money would get printed, currency would devalue far quicker, etc., etc. So well done them.
Indeed. Those are by far the most successful parts of the ANC and have been for a long time. Okay, thank you very much for everyone for listening. Please check out our sponsored advice. The link will be below, and we will see you tomorrow on the Daily Friend Show. Hope you all have a magnificent and wonderful day. Cheers, everyone.